Good afternoon, everybody. It's a rainy Thursday, and I'm home for the day because I went to the hospital earlier, so got some time. Figured I could do an update on the AR9 build that I'm working on and address some of the issues that I've ran into and hopefully answer some questions if you've got any. So before we get started, we'll just safety check. Okay. It is clear, and we're good to go. So this is the AR9 build that I mentioned in the last video, and everything's put together. I'd say we're at about 90%. I'm still waiting on the can, obviously, the Omega 9K, which probably won't get here until December 2017, so it could be quite a while for that. And also, I'm going to Form 1 this as well once I kind of relearn the new conditions now that I don't actually have to get the Chief Law Enforcement sign-off. So I'll just reread that and then probably do that within a week or two here. But right now I'm rocking a cheek rest that I do not shoulder. I use it as a cheek rest. That said, I am aware of the recent ATF letter regarding the SB braces and that you can shoulder those. I mean, this isn't an SB brace. I feel like what they're saying in the letter would more than justify you shouldering this. I personally don't have a problem with it either way, and I'd rather be in compliance with the law in whatever weird abstract sense. So I think the easiest thing to do is just to shoot it like a pistol, use this as a cheek rest, and then I will SBR it, and that'll take care of all the issues. So that's coming in the pipeline. But for now, I just wanted to show the build off as it stands and mention some of the issues I ran into. Okay, so the first issue that I ran into was that I broke the bolt catch some time ago. This was probably a week after I built the rifle, or the pistol, and it broke in a weird spot. It actually broke here down by the roll pin, not up here, which is kind of where I figured it would have broken due to the bolt slapping forward too hard. So I have some theories as to why that might be, and it's possible that the original configuration with a standard spring and standard carbine buffer, or excuse me, heavy buffer, but with a standard spring and no spacers, that may have actually been fine for this build. Although it's possible that something I was doing with the magazines would have weakened this, and then that was exacerbated by the bolt slapping forward because it was moving too fast. So who knows? It could have been multiple things going on, and I just didn't want to test for them one by one, so I tried to do a fix-all solution that seems to have worked, and that's why I'm pursuing the SBR, the Form 1, or I will be very soon. So that's something I ran into, and I'll get into why. The second thing is the magazines. Pretty much all the parts that I got for this build came from MidwayUSA.com, and these were just the Colt SMG 9mm double-stack magazines. They had great reviews. It was like 4.5 or 5 stars. They were pretty cheap, and these are the 32 rounders. The only issue that I've run into is they actually don't seem to fit just perfectly in like a 9mm AR. And I don't know if it's possibly because it's just the upper receiver that I'm using, although I think that's unlikely. It's a Aero Precision stripped upper receiver, or it was when I bought it. That's possible. I think the more likely solution is that really up here, just the dimensions are off just a little bit, possibly for an AR style upper. So that might be part of it, but basically this is straight from the factory. I've shot both of them, but this one I haven't messed with. As you can see, I've filed and polished the other one pretty good. This one will actually not seat properly. It won't lock, and you can tell like I'm pushing on it, and even with the bolt back, it actually is not locking. And now I could slap it and then it would, and that's what I did initially. That may have contributed to the bolt catch breaking, so I'm not going to do it here to demonstrate, but you would have to give it a good slap, especially when it was fully loaded with ammunition. So what I did, after a lot of research, I thought maybe there was an issue with the lower receiver, so I was hesitant to then want to do a Form 1. Then I thought maybe it was the upper receiver. I really don't think it's the case unless you could say that the internal dimensions up here are off for the upper receiver, but it's an Aero Precision upper. I looked it up online before I bought it, and it had excellent reviews. It was just the basic, I think like a $90 or $100 upper receiver. And it's mil spec, so if there's an issue with this because of dimensions, then that would really mean that anything that was mil spec would be problematic. So I don't think it's the lower or the upper receiver. I think what it actually is the dimensions of the magazine, specifically right up here by the lips, are just slightly too wide. So after about 20 minutes of filing and some sandpaper work and all that, I've now got a solution where, there you go, barely any pressure on the bottom, and the magazine locks securely. It doesn't fall out, I can't pull it out, and it ejects just like it's supposed to when I push the mag release. So once again, for comparison, here's the standard magazine, or the unaltered magazine, and it gets right to that locking point, but then you'd really have to slap it, and I don't want to do that. Filed and polished, and there you go. And this is with the bolt back, by the way. It's slightly more difficult when the bolt's forward, but I'm not one of those guys that loads magazine and then uses the charging handle to cock the gun. That's not how I was taught, and I just don't do it like that anyway. I'd prefer to use the paddle, so this is how I almost always fire it. And no pressure at all, just a little pressure and it locks in just fine. So now I'd like to show you kind of some of the internals and what I think may have contributed to that. So once again, weapon's clear. We'll just take it apart really quick. Okay. So stripped, when I bought it, it was a stripped Aero Precision upper. I've got the quarter circle 10, 9mm Colt, or just, I guess it's the 9mm, yeah, just the 9mm bolt, which I may have to mess with that. BCM Mod 4 medium charging handle. I love this charging handle. I have it on my SBR, the other SBR that's actually ATF approved, and yeah, so that's the upper receiver. And I think probably even right here, if you look real close, I know the light's not great, you can probably see where there's metal on metal wear that was impeding the magazine when I was inserting it. So we'll come back to that. So that's the upper receiver. The lower, nothing special. Now earlier when I said slapping the magazine may have actually contributed to the original bolt catch breaking, the reason for that is on the quarter circle 10 lowers, the bolt catch is just a standard AR bolt catch, but it's triggered by this extension, and this extension has a little lip that connects with the lip on the receiver or the follower of the magazine right in the back there. So slapping that too hard may have actually contributed to stressing the bolt catch. I'm not really sure, and it's kind of hard to tell. It feels like right here when this magazine's fully inserted, the bolt catch is pushed up and out as far as it could be. So slapping that definitely could have weakened it. And given where it broke, I think that's a definite possibility. I just can't say for sure. And you notice with the upper receiver taken off, this magazine, the unaltered magazine, does lock just fine. So that says that it couldn't be, my issue couldn't have been the lower receiver. So it was something about the magazine dimensions and the internal dimension of the upper receiver. And obviously the polished magazine fits just fine. This one actually fits even better. It's a little smoother, but no issues there. So because of where this broke, I said, you know what, let me get new stuff. I had to get a new spring, new bolt catch, all off of Midway. And I also got a Wolfe heavyweight spring because I started reading some forums and saw that maybe I didn't have a heavy enough spring. I already have a buffer which is heavier than an H3 buffer. This one, it's not marked, but on the Midway website, it was just listed as heavy buffer, recommended for use in SBRs and 9mm AR versions. And this one's like 5.8 ounces. An H3 buffer is 5.2 or 5.3. So this is definitely heavier than an H3. And it was also the heaviest one that they had on their website, or I would have gone heavier. So I was using this originally with just a standard spring. That would have allowed for greater bolt travel, or a greater buffer and bolt travel. So it could have picked up too much velocity coming back, and then it would have slammed forward and contributed to the breaking of the bolt catch. So what I did was I got a Wolfe heavyweight spring that was like $13. And honestly, that was like one of the best things I ever did. This spring is awesome. I put it in my other SBR, which is a 5.56, and that has actually significantly cut down on recoil on that as well. I mean, I could do controlled pairs at 50 feet with irons, no problem, with that spring. That's how much it stopped my SBR from jumping around. So it's really helped this, and it's also helped me not break another bolt catch. But in addition to that, I added a spacer, albeit an impromptu spacer, in the form of quarters. These are almost the perfect size, well, they are the perfect size, to fit inside your buffer tube. And this is exactly $3 a quarter, so 12 quarters. This behind the spring compresses it even further, and this adds to, or reduces, I should say, this further reduces the amount of bolt travel. So because the spring is so stiff, and it's also slightly longer than a standard spring, and I've got this spacer, which is probably, man, maybe like 0.8 of an inch or something, that's really slowed the bolt down and then limited how far back it can travel. And so I'm well over 500 rounds now with a new bolt catch. No issues, nothing's broken, everything seems to be working just fine. So if you've had that issue with a 9mm AR or pistol, rifle, SBR, or whatever, definitely look into a heavier buffer. But if you get a heavier buffer, make sure you get a heavier spring to slow it down, and then you probably will still want a spacer, because I have a feeling that without the spacer, the bolt could still travel too far back, and the buffer could also travel too far back. And then it would slow it down, but the added strength of the spring could also kind of counterintuitively slap it forward even harder at the end. So you might still be able to break your bolt catch. And that was kind of my theory. And that was my concern too when I got a heavy spring. So I think with the spacer, not only would it slow down the bolt and the buffer, the spacer would also limit the distance that it could travel as well. And I'll show you that too when I put it back together here. So 12 quarters for me. The reason I went with 12 is because, as you will see here, 12 is just enough for the bolt to clear the bolt catch, but not so much that it barely clears it and then fails to lock back on the last round. And I had that issue a few times, but I will now demonstrate. So everything, yeah, there we go. Okay, I know it's going to be kind of hard to see, and it's dark in here, but basically the bolt catch is like right here. So I'll try to capture this. Yeah, so probably can't see it. I probably should have gotten a flashlight, but the bolt catch is like right here. So honestly, it's not even, it might even be like 1/8 of an inch. Or maybe, no, it couldn't be a quarter. Somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. And also, as you can see, that is like, I mean, that right there is as far back as the bolt goes with the spacer, with the 12 quarters. And then right here is where it locks. So let me do that again. So this is as far back as the bolt goes. And then here is where it locks. And then here, so like right there. That's where the bolt catch is. So I've really limited the movement, and so far I haven't broken the new bolt catch, and I don't think I will. I think I solved that problem. So if you're having that issue with your 9mm AR build or whatever, definitely consider maybe slapping the mags in too hard could have broken it, and then you might have too much bolt travel. You also might not have a strong enough spring to slow the bolt down. So consider maybe a heavier bolt, heavier spring, and if you do those two things, you'll probably need a spacer as well. That's an update on the 9mm pistol build as it currently stands. I think it looks awesome. I think it looks mostly awesome. It looks a little funny without having the can right here to stick out through the handguard or the rail, but it's awesome. It's been a really fun build. I've enjoyed putting it together almost as much, if not more, than shooting it, I'm ashamed to say. And yeah, if you guys have any questions about this process, about broken bolt catches or anything like that, just hit me up in the comments, and I'd love to hear it. Thanks.